All right, so let's maybe I think we'll switch over to kind of the cultivation side. Maybe we'll mix in the hemp and CBD market, kind of playing into those market conditions we were just discussing. And getting into the industry now, we were talking about how you got to really have an expertise if you're going to look at a dispensary, cultivation, or any of the plant touching businesses mostly. And the hemp side is interesting to me because much lower barrier to entry. It is much more accessible for most people. And I wonder how those two are going to either clash or compete when they merge, because there's so much overlap. I know the government says hemp is this thing, 0.3% THC or less, but now when you're taking CBD isolate and literally making Delta 9 THC from it and saying, well, it's hemp derived, somehow that has to be addressed. So maybe starting with thinking of cultivation, cannabis specific, you have a state license. How are people looking at the cultivation side now and kind of planning for the future? Do you see kind of a battle developing, concerns around that? Like, what's the landscape from your perspective?
Yeah, I think over the years, we've had the opportunity to work with some of the, I feel the best cultivators in this industry, talking like Ed Rosenthal, Jeff Lowenfels, Autumn Carsey, Mike Finley. So I feel like I'm very lucky to be connected to some of the best. So, I don't know, I'm not, super tuned in to, the cultivation side of things other than just following, like I said, those that I'm close with. But, I think we've definitely seen an evolution of cultivation over the years. The saying everyone likes to throw out there is like, it's not your parents' weed anymore. Because, it's not that, swag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? After you said that word so long, I had to think about it for a second. That's swag. So, I mean, it's really interesting because, there's the debate between indoor, outdoor versus greenhouse. And I think, that really is dictated by the environment, that you're growing in, here in Maryland, with the humidity and the, cold winters, it's like, outdoor and greenhouse, aren't as popular here. There is, I think a couple greenhouses, I want to say at least one. But, obviously in a climate like here, it's easier to control everything in an indoor facility. And, not that my opinion matters that much, what they say about opinions. But, for me, on a medical market, I do kind of feel that indoor kind of is, the best policy, because when you're growing medicine for patients, being able to control, every aspect of the process from environment to temperature to lighting and everything like that is just a little bit more controlled. So you can kind of replicate those results. So obviously, that's something that is challenging because cannabis is a natural, plant medicine. So, you grow something that's great. And even if it changes a little bit and, it works for a patient great that first time, and it's just a little bit different, it might not have the same effect for that patient. Yeah. So that can cause kind of, sadness and depression even in the patient because, unfortunately, when people come to you and they say, hey, I'm just going to start using cannabis, like, which one should I use, for X, Y, and Z? And, like I was talking about Dr. Deddy and his work of, finding which strains work better for, which conditions. It's also a matter of our genetics and makeup and our DNA. And, we all metabolize things differently. And, one thing that works for me differently will work, differently for someone else. So unfortunately, it is a trial and error, so when you kind of send, a loved one to the dispensary, it's like, try this, get a little bit of, a couple different things, and you just have to really kind of try it. And, journaling is so important to patients because you can journal. But, that's why, testing is so important, to standardize cannabis testing, to be able to replicate that, exact thing and that exact result is important. Because, I always tell people, it's like, if you get a blue dream and you're thinking, oh, this blue dream works great for me at home, I'm going to use it out there, that's probably going to be a totally different, cannabinoid profile. Might be in the same universe, but even the same, facility, different batches of the same, strain can be different. So I think that, especially if we do look at a medical federal program, I think there will be more incentives and needs to further that research and really hone in on making specific medicines with specific strains of cannabis. So again, that's, my hope for those side-by-side programs is because there will not be as much incentive to do scientific and medical research on this plant if it's regulate like alcohol. Like they're not out there doing much research on alcohol as a medicine right now.
Right.
Maybe like the addiction ramifications of alcohol, but they're not like, oh, let's keep studying alcohol. But alcohol was used as a medicine, and so was cocaine at some point in this country. So it's like I would hate to see cannabis end up like that and just be kind of forgotten about as a medical research and science-based opportunity as well.
Yeah, and that would be probably a result if it just went full recreational adult use. And the strains it's interesting. And that point you brought up is spot on. We've had, like the edibles we make, we've gotten that feedback sometimes when we switch to a new strain. We even control, cannabinoids are all the same that we're checking for, same dominant terpenes, but someone will reach out and be like, hey, I bought the same one last time. It was working. Now it's not working. And even as the individual's body could build up a tolerance to a certain, so some variability in there, but the indoor grow, smaller batches, you can control for a lot more of that stuff, looking at it from a medicinal side. So thinking about the strain names, are you seeing anyone starting to shift away from that? I know there's kind of effects-based marketing, but kind of leading into the future, at least just on the medicinal side, do you see some of that starting to happen? It feels like I see some companies try, and we've tried, but there's still so much resistance against it when people go shop just for the strain name, or they'll look at the highest THC percentage as kind of the shopping approach, at least on the adult use.
Right. And and I think pop culture plays a role as well, because a lot of these strain names you've heard in like the movies or the show you're watching, and I think that it's really interesting because I remember, I don't know, maybe it was like 3 years ago when everybody was getting like cease and desist letters because they were using like Gorilla Glue and, Pikachu and like all these different things. And it's like, yeah, you guys, intellectual property, like these people are not going to be happy that you're, doing that. So, I mean, my thing is just like, because of the sheer fact that you, like you just said, you call something a blue dream and then you go to 5 different states, and you send it off to a different testing laboratory, it's going to be different. Mm-hmm. So it's like, instead of it being that name that people associate with that medicine or that product, if it was more of like identified a little differently and it was more exact, you know what I mean? So it's like, if you're looking for X, Y, and Z, as far as the cannabinoid ratios, it's called, RD2713, you know what I mean? Like something, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just a little too general. And I think people that are new coming into the industry, it can be overwhelming to know that, like, yes, just because it's like, if you go to Walmart and you buy oil of Olay shampoo in Maryland, and then you go to Walmart in California and you buy oil of Olay shampoo, it's going to be exactly the same. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case with the strains. And, like I said, even in the same state at the same facility, it can be different. So,
yeah, I don't know how you should, if there was an ideal situation, we had the magic wand, how you would categorize. I've seen some people in Portland want to do like type 1, type 2, type 3. So one is high THC, one is 1-to-1 with the CBD, or one is high CBD, almost no THC, kind of starting there and then breaking it down further. But then as, terpenes are gaining more interest, minor cannabinoids more interest, like it's so hard to categorize, and effect space really isn't ideal either because people are different. And so you can't apply a general effect that's going to be the same for everybody. I think it's better than the strain name approach because that's much more random. But yeah, it's and there's so much complexity and diversity in that I don't know how you could, like, in a perfect system. And people, you could say as a scientist, well, list every cannabinoid, list every terpene, and maybe we'll get to listing flavonoids one day. And then
you're like attaching like a book to each thing.
But most consumers don't want that either. Like I actually that's how I want to shop, but I know, obviously, been doing a lot of the education. I understand a lot of that stuff. So,
well, I will say that I've noticed that like the more, like when patients come to our show, and the medical track is very geared to our patients, they really, when they start learning more, they get really excited about it and they want to know more. Then, when they start talking about the terpenes and they're journaling and everything, the key to that is we need more research. You know what I mean? We need to open this up so researchers can freely do this and freely get funding, and even public funding and government, government funding. Because the thing is, it's like, it's just been suppressed for so long. And, I'm good friends, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Sue Sicily. And, she went through all the hassle of obtaining the Schedule I research license. And just saying that out loud, like you have to do all that to study cannabis because it's scheduled next to heroin, is just absurd. So, and then once she finally got the license, the samples she was forced to work with were from the University of Mississippi that was your parents' weed. You know what I mean? They're growing it with archaic standards. So it's like trying to study apples to oranges. Yeah. So if we had these brilliant minds, the Ethan Russos, the Sue Sicily's, the Deddy Miris of the world, they really, this was open up more here in the US, they could really dig into this, and we could maybe get some of those answers and figure out, more about some of that stuff. Yeah. But it's just hard now because, a lot of the research that's been done here has been on the potential harms of cannabis. And I don't think that research has gotten very far.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know, like, on the, thinking about the hemp side of the industry. And I always find it kind of what we were saying earlier, the way the rules or regulations get set impact so much downstream, just the technology that's developed, which, if you just looked at it with common sense, you go, that's kind of pointless. As an example, converting CBD isolate to Delta-9. You wouldn't do that if cannabis was federally legal, or the Delta-8 or the 11, those other ones that are, isolate or the derivative versions of THC, to get around a loophole so that hemp CBD isolate, the mass supply of it that's in the market, can then be converted into a product where markets you can't get cannabis products. What do you see on kind of the attendees and the vendors? I mean, I imagine there's a lot of companies developing a lot of this technology and the processes for it just because of that's how it's currently set up. But It's like, is that going to change in the future? How are they looking at it?
I'll tell you, CBD is just another cannabinoid of the plant that we've been talking about this whole time. So for me, like, hemp and CBD, that type of content had always been throughout all of our content, you know what I mean? And analytical and medical and cultivation. We did find that after the Farm Bill, I kind of think the Farm Bill was like a great thing, but a terrible thing at the same time.
It's a mixed bag for sure, depending on where you're,
depending on where you're sitting and where you're looking at it. But, we kind of noticed that after the Farm Bill, where it was technically legal, that the hemp and CBD industry started to kind of segment out from cannabis into like their own industry. You know what I mean? Because they, I guess at the end of the day, who can blame them? They had the kind of green light to do it. But it's kind of like, you're like, hey, remember us? Like when we were, supporting each other back here. But so we created the hemp and CBD track specifically because of that reason, because, if that's specifically what you're working in and you don't want to spend the time like, oh, there's a hemp talk here and analytical that, bop it around, it's all in one, place. So you can see it all there. Like I said, my thoughts were, we've always included it in all the agenda and all the content. But, if that's the way that industry was going, like I said, it's its own kind of sub-industry, we were happy to do that, because if they, are going to send people and they're only specifically interested in that education, we wanted to make it easy for them to do that. But, I think because of the, Farm Bill is now we see this wave of gas station CBD, MLM CBD, and, it's really interesting. And I would encourage a lot of people that are out there, taking these CBDs that you're getting on Amazon or at the gas station or whatever, like, send that off to be tested somewhere. And you might be surprised at what you find out. Cause, I know that we've done that a couple of times over the years. And, some of these products that are being sold on some of these platforms will make you pop on a drug test, for THC. So a lot of people don't realize that. And they're, going that route and using it, especially in government jobs and, regulated industries where they're not allowed to partake of the plant. And, they think, oh, I'm using this, hemp-based product that's not going to, whatever. But, so, that's the thing. It's like, at the end of the day, we're all about quality and testing and safety and education. And, for us, when somebody's selling, really, pardon my, expression, but snake oil at a gas station, that brings concern, you know what I mean? When there's no COA associated with it. So I feel like that was a bit of a rush to do that, in a sense. But, again, at the end of the day, maybe it also caused some visibility for the rest of us that are in the, rest of cannabis. But again, I think that it's a little dangerous and a little slippery slope to make too much of a distinction between CBD and cannabis.
Yeah.
Because it is same
yeah.
thing. It's kind of like, goes back to like recreational or adult use versus medical. I remember I spoke at the first cannabis conference in Bogota, Colombia, and we met with it was the government agency that's like the DEA there. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but this was back in like 2017. And, aside from the conference, we went and met with them one of the days. And, the question that they kept asking me and some of the other thought leaders were like, how can you tell the difference between a medical plant and a recreational plant?
That's funny to think about.
And they didn't like my answer because I said taxes and tagging, and they thought I was being facetious, and I was being a little facetious. But really, at the end of the day, a medical or an adult use plant, taxing and tagging is the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they thought the Farm Bill. They did not see the back end of what was going to come from that. I think they would have not been so. And I don't think people know, especially just normal consumer. I mean, you've only got so much time to research, investigate, but the complete lack of oversight on the hemp side. I've had people reach out. They're like, well, I had this one edible. It kind of worked. And then the next time I got this like paranoia attack. And it's like, even if they provide you a COA, it's like in cannabis, at least you're testing multiple times from the same batch. There's seed to sale tracking. There's like that part of the system in place, which on the hemp side, I mean, you can be a fly by night company and snake oil so easily, which you can't really pull off in cannabis anymore unless you're doing it completely illegal. And then you're into the, going to prison type thing. You get caught.
Well, and even like the Delta 8, I've seen, people like I had a scientist I knew that was like, oh, I don't want to use cannabis because I want to test, but I'll try this Delta 8, and not a good experience. You know what I mean? And I don't really have, a position on that either way. I have not really partaken of Delta 8 myself. I just consume the cannabis that I purchased.
You don't need to. It's almost pointless.
Right.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's kind of that workaround, go around. And then, also we had a situation where, there were warning letters sent out by the FDA to a lot of these hemp and CBD brands that were making claims and medical, claims and, things like that about treating certain things and it being used for certain things. So I know there were quite a few warning letters that went out about that a few years ago. But, like you said, it was something that was done with no oversight. And, it probably set us back a few years with our movement as well on a federal level, just because they're like, if this is how it is for this non-psychoactive CBD hemp stuff, like, boy, we don't even want to get into that other stuff, Well,
we talked about just trying to figure out lab standards for interstate commerce. Now you're also talking about trying to merge in the hemp industry, which is directly competing currently. And how will those come together? Have you heard the regulators, and you're talking about getting that panel together with the agencies from the different states, when they talk about the hemp side, are there any ideas? Because I think what happened was obviously the Farm Bill, all these companies rushed it, made this whole industry that's new.
Right.
Now that is so big that there's lobbyists on that side that are now, I mean, it's such a big industry, it's hard to turn that wave back, but somehow those have to merge. Do the regulators have any idea at this point of how they might pull that off, or any ideas you hear floated out there?
Yeah, most of the contacts that I have that I talk to, on a regular basis in the regulatory side of cannabis have nothing to do with.
Right, they're separated. They act like, well, that's not my thing.
And, and they'll like, people will like actually send inquiries and questions to like the state commissions, and it's just like, we don't handle that. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm in between Maryland and Delaware, back and forth. As far as I know, in either of these two states, I don't know of a hemp commission that's like in charge of like regulating or running or overseeing it like the cannabis commission does. But
yeah, that's one. We'll save that probably for later down the road. Yeah, that one we'll have to get to, and after they look at federal, that's going to be a major.
Well, because people are using that are still, a lot of the people that are using that are still like on the fence of cannabis, or they just don't want to use cannabis. And if they're going to that, they're a lot of times using it for their sick loved ones or their sick dogs or for themselves if they're dealing with something. So it's like, again, going back to patients, especially if you're immunocompromised, like using something that's not tested stringently, and you can't see, the breakdown of exactly what cannabinoids are present in it. I always encourage, whether it's hemp, cannabis, or anything, if you don't have those testing results and those COA in front of you, I wouldn't use it.
Yeah. On the so psychedelic side is interesting. So thinking of having to start in Portland originally and then going to Baltimore, having the psychedelic track in Baltimore, where I think, Portland or Oregon, we legalized a medicinal program for psilocybin. And I think it's 2023, the first licensed facilities. I think you have to consume on site. There'll be a therapist there, but you're going to legally be able to walk in, and there's the preconditions. I think almost basically anybody's going to be able to do it. It's not a huge barrier to entry. But on the Baltimore side, what's the view around psychedelics or that conversation there? Does it feel like 2016 cannabis there still, or is it more opened up?
I had to tell you, I feel like we went into the pandemic and came out, and there were like ketamine clinics all over the country. And there was like all this talk about, because it was a little bit, going into 2019, but I feel like over those couple of years, we saw a lot. What I'm seeing from my end, in doing the track in Long Beach and having the agenda set for Baltimore, is that the psychedelic industry is taking a very research and clinical based approach to what they're doing, which is a lot different than the advocacy based approach, like we talked about earlier, that we took with cannabis, and kind of still are on that journey because we can't really have the research. So, I think that we're seeing a lot quicker of a movement. Like, I think that we could see the psychedelic industry, go beyond the cannabis industry, even faster with trajectory that we saw with cannabis. For instance, one of the keynotes we have in Baltimore is Dr. Matthew Johnson from Johns Hopkins University. And he is talking about his research with psychedelics in the use of treatment for tobacco addiction. And he's actually one of the, most widely interviewed and featured psychedelic researchers. Has been all over the, mainstream news, Anderson Cooper, all these other great platforms. And then we also have people like Dr. Denise Vidal from the University of Miami, who's actually talking about psilocybin and cannabis, for COVID. And then we have the University of Maryland. So I'm sure you're probably familiar. They have a master's in cannabis science or master's in science cannabis therapeutics program. They're going to be giving a keynote as well, discussing their intention to launch a psychedelic therapeutics course as a part of their MS program in cannabis science. So I think that's great. And, like I said, it's like just thinking about, cannabis and academics in 2015 was just like, hell no. You know what I mean? Like that was not happening. So to see like a university, obviously cannabis had already had that springboard for them, but to see them so already able and willing to look at the psychedelic conversation in academics, I think is great. And I think, anything that can help the world, be better and, get off of, 10, 15 different medications. Because let's be honest, I don't want to seem like, we're bashing, the pharmaceutical industry because, there's a lot of people that are suffering with a lot of conditions that pharmaceuticals are necessary and will always have a place for pharmaceuticals. But, it's no secret that, you see the commercials on TV and it's like, and they make them look sexy and it's, people having fun. And it's like, you want to say, hey, let me ask my doctor about this. But, in most other countries, their, pharmaceutical is not allowed to market to the population. They have to market to the medical providers and doctors and nurses. So you're not seeing the ads on TV. You're not seeing the ads in magazines and newspapers. And, we all know how those commercials go. It's like, oh, it's great. It's going to help me with this, but it's going to cause restless leg syndrome and insomnia and vomiting and, maybe death. So it's just like each medication can cause another ailment for you to take another medication that causes another ailment for you to take another medication. So if we can look at cannabis and things like psilocybin and ayahuasca and, peyote and even ketamine, as a treatment option to like cut down on some of that stuff, I think that's great because, you can't make a direct correlation, but if you just look at the amount of sickness and cancer and illness we have nowadays, and, people are dying younger and younger and younger, so it just is a situation where we're really in need of more options, and especially the natural options. I say put them at the front of the line.
Yeah. I think, from personal experience, what you've seen cannabis kind of evolve into, the psychedelic side is a lot newer and there's a lot of science that has to be done, but if those were available and there was education on how, when they might be useful, I think they cover so many bases for most people. It's almost, if it's done correctly, it's almost ridiculous of how helpful those could be. And, you know, if you get cynical about it, that is a major threat to the established system that's in place, and, you know, gives people a lot more autonomy, control over their situation. From the science.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting too, because I was just having a chat with a psychedelic researcher the other day that's actually doing clinical trials. And, you know, I'm, you know, in my mind, again, I don't know everything. I learn it every day, just like everybody else. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, if people are going in, and they're obviously using synthetic psilocybin when they're doing the clinical research, but it's like, to find out the amount of dose that they're actually giving patients, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm sure it's a micro dose. It's probably like, but then like, you know, one of the researchers like, no, it's like 5, like in comparison, what they're giving them synthetic would be about 5 to 6 grams of dried mushrooms. And I was like, whoa, because like if you've done mushrooms,
you think that they wouldn't let them start there, and it's like, well,
right, without saying too much, it's just like, whoa, you know what I mean? So I was just like, wow, like that must be interesting from the person who's taken that much to the person that's monitoring them, you know what I mean? And right now, I believe most are not set up as group, because I think that's like obviously insurance issues and, you know, things like that. So I think that if they could get to more group settings, that would obviously help advance some of that clinical research. And again, you know, I think it's great to see that research, but it's the same conversation with, you know, cannabis and Marinol and things like that. It's just we're going to a synthetic when we have the natural plant right here that we could be.
And what else are you missing out on that we don't even know we don't know? Like when you think of cannabis, I mean, terpenes were in essential oils, but it wasn't really a thought around a cannabis plant or other minors. And if you just were allowed at the regulations to make the synthetic THC, and that was all that kind of was there, what else could be in there that we might miss? And then if the market evolves, rules are set in place, you could almost skip over some key critical things that are never. I mean, mushroom strains is a very interesting conversation when we think of all the cannabis strains. You know, I think mushrooms are just.
Like, who would have thought psilocybin for tobacco addiction? You know what I mean? Like that never crossed my mind until I saw the submission from the speaker. So it's great to see.
It's so cool to see that it moved so quickly. You would think cannabis feels more approachable. When you get into psychedelics, especially at 5-6 grams equivalent, you're getting into an area that has a lot of potential, but feels like a lot more risk at the same time. You know, one huge bad negative story can really set things back. And from talking with those people, do they have a concern, or what? Do they see something that could be kind of the downfall of that, where it would try to get wrapped up again, you know, like it did the Sweeping Act in the past, kind of shut all that down? Is it far enough along where it really that side couldn't be destroyed, or do you think there's still the potential there that could try to be repackaged back into Pandora's box somehow?
Yeah. You know, I think like with anything that is, you know, quote unquote taboo, stigmatized, there's always that risk. And there's even that risk with cannabis, you know, technically. But I always say with cannabis, like, good luck putting that monster back in the box, because at this point, it's never going to happen. Yeah. And, you know, I would say the same for the psychedelic research that's being done, but maybe a little less so, but still in the same universe. You know what I mean? Like, I think it is a little more new and emerging. And I think that, you know, someone could come along. But I think that from, you know, even, like I said, the dosing I was talking about, that researcher couldn't share with me any like negative, you know what I mean, real negative experiences. You know what I mean? Where it was like, oh wow, maybe we're not doing the right thing. You know what I mean? So I think that, you know, for that to happen, I would imagine that there'd have to be a buildup of, you know, reasons why they would, you know, come from that angle, and, you know, not just the morality or religion or any of those things. And, you know, to that I say, you know, look back further in history and time, and like some of these things like cannabis and mushrooms and other psychedelics could actually be part of your religion and other things that you don't even realize how far back it goes. You know, people close their minds sometimes. And I think that's a big part of, especially psilocybin. You know, there's so many people that are, you know, doing the microdosing every single day, and, you know, they swear by it. And, you know, I say, like, you know, just like with cannabis, if something helps improve your life and, you know, it doesn't negatively affect you in any way, like, why not? You know?
Is there any perspective or conversation around what Oregon is doing, how other states or the researchers view it? Do they think it's, a good way forward? Or are they kind of curious of how that's going to develop? Because it still feels like a lot of uncertainty around how exactly those facilities are going to, how that's going to work out, what it might lead to after
it's
that.
It's kind of like the cannabis lounges.
The first, yeah.
Like, oh, we're getting cannabis lounges. And it's like, when? You know what I mean? I'm sure, like, I can't really speak for all the psychedelic research, but I would imagine it's probably a mixed bag. I think a lot of them do the work that they do because they want to open up access and they want people to be able to utilize this. And I'm sure there are others that are probably like, hey, going too much too fast might actually hinder and get in the way of the research we're trying to do improve. But, that's the great thing about, this country is, we are the United States of America, but we are in our own, states. And, for a lot of issues, I don't particularly agree with states' rights when it comes to like human rights issues typically, and cannabis is a human rights issue. But when it comes to things like gay marriage and abortion and things like that, I don't agree with the state by state. But with cannabis, with, things like psychedelics, it's like, it's working. You know what I mean? It's working. And, I remember with gay marriage, it was one of those things where everyone thought it would just be each state would do it until they all did it. And then it was finally done. And then there were a couple of states, and Utah being one of them, which is kind of ironic that Utah was part of the reason that sprung-barred them into doing it federally. You know what I mean? Because they were like, hey, we kind of thought everybody would just go along and do it state by state. But, since some of these states were pushing back. But yeah, so I think it's probably a mixed bag when you look at stuff like that. And, but I commend Oregon, personally, I think it's great. And, again, with the psilocybin and other psychedelics, I would definitely, caution any new users or new participants of, experimenting in those arenas to definitely, even more so with cannabis, like start low and go up slow, because, for those of us that have been on a few journeys, you just, you want to, ease into it. And, it can be a lot if you go too far too quick.
Yeah, if you think you can have a bad cannabis experience or edible, the psychedelics are the next level up above that.
Right.
And I wonder I feel like the industry or psychedelics are a little safer, because what I think the concern would be is Oregon does medicinal, somehow that turns into an adult use rec thing, and then what could happen with cannabis is it turns into just the money and the business side, and the research is kind of forgotten about. But I feel like there's less of a profit money potential on psychedelics. Cannabis is more regular consumption. A high consumer might spend a lot of money on cannabis. The psychedelics are kind of once, twice, three, you might be done,
Yeah.
So maybe they'll be preserved a little more because the profit motivation won't be there as strongly.
Well, and I feel that, at least from where I'm sitting and where I'm looking at it, I feel that the best we could probably hope for psychedelics is like a medical market. I don't really foresee, and I mean, who am I? Like I said, opinions, everybody knows. But I personally I struggle to grasp wrapping my mind around them saying, oh, let's regulate, ketamine and psilocybin and peyote and ayahuasca like alcohol, and just you could go into a store and buy all that stuff. I will tell you, I was at a conference recently, and I won't say the name of the conference, just, whatever. But it was a great conference, nothing against the conference, but I was really surprised that in the exhibit hall, they actually had vendors that were selling mushroom chocolate bars, DMT vape pens, and things like that. And this was at a, state convention center. So it was kind of and being an event organizer, I was like, oh my God, I would be losing my mind. But it was just interesting. And, I was thinking to myself, what if this was cannabis? You know what I mean? Even going to a convention center and seeing people selling cannabis,
right.
You don't even see that. So I was just wow, that just was interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like I said, who knows? You know what I mean? I think it would be a really interesting world if you could just pop into a liquor store and pop out with some psilocybin and peyote. And the other thing is, with a lot of these psychedelics, I think it's really important to note that we need to honor the culture and the originating, stories and people that like were the gatekeepers of this knowledge. You know what I mean? So a lot of the things that we've talked about are more of traditional journeys. You know what I mean? So I think that, instead of appropriating these cultures and taking advantage of them, we should appreciate them and, do things the right way and with intention.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things, call for ceremony and preparation and things like that. So I definitely encourage anyone that is, talking about psychedelics to, research, the indigenous people who are really, like I said, the gatekeepers of it. And, for us, it really is a marriage, because we are the Cannabis Science Conference. So it's all about, the science, the research, but with the psychedelics specifically, because, we've kind of lost our way with cannabis. So like we haven't really honored the people who have come before us as far as the ones that have been wronged by the war on drugs and, families torn apart and, fathers taken from children, mothers taken from children. So I feel like we have an opportunity with psychedelics to honor those voices, unlike we really didn't do in the beginning of cannabis industry, but we're trying to do more now. It's just lift those up and like make sure that those voices, should they choose to, have a seat at the table. Because anyone that's starting a company or doing research, working with like someone that is a shaman that understands this, that does ceremony, you might not think it, but they can add a lot of value to what you're doing, your research and your work and the why behind some of this.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. That legacy knowledge, and I think that's where scientists get a little snooty, is like the shaman doesn't know like the molecule interaction to the receptor through the neurochemistry. Right. But they can tell you so much, and like, I mean, the repetition of experience in those ceremonies, and there's a reason it's like set and setting is such a bigger part of psychedelics too. Like, they might not know the black and white science, but the scientists should be learning from them on what to study, how do you like, and then we can work on if we want to figure out the molecules, receptors, and dial all that in. But yeah, to blow it under the rug is ridiculous. Yeah, you're setting yourself back. Yeah. Awesome. Joshua, it was great to finally chat with you. I was really excited to have this conversation. I want to let people know maybe where they can find you. We'll put a link to the conference in Baltimore that's coming up, but anywhere else, website, social media, you want to send people?
Yeah, people can check out the conference, CannabisScienceConference.com, on most social media at Cannabis Science Conference. Twitter is at CannabisIcon. And then on all platforms, I'm at Josh Crossney.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the time. I'll talk to you later, Josh.
Thank you, Wayne. It has been a pleasure joining you, and I am excited to see you again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Sounds
good. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.